Welcome back. This is now going to be the final mechanics for my casual game mechanics series. After this, we're going to be talking about systems and object pooling and kind of like some procedurally generated stuff. So what we're going to do after now is we're doing the merging mechanics. So there's a game called, I think, Merge Town. It's that kind of thing. So basically, you're kind of merging games that you're getting on the mobile, where you take two objects, you combine them, and in this case it's going to be cubes. I have these awesome sprites from Kenny.nl. It's just this kind of crate, a more fortified crate, and then a really fancy one. So we're just going to be combining these three crates together. Let me delete this, I don't need that. And each crate will over time accumulate currency or whatever it is. So that's the kind of thing that we're planning to do. So it's going to be like just merging the same type of item together. So first thing I want to do is create some simple code that will add all of these platforms to a list, and then have a boolean on these platforms that tell them that whether they're occupied or unoccupied. So we're going to be doing this in Bolt. So I'm going to just switch my layout to Bolt so it's just easier. And I'm going to select one of these little floor pieces. They should be a prefab. Just want to make sure that they're the correct type of prefab. Just see if these ones are inside of the bolt. Yes, they are. Okay, so they're all the same object. So once I add a flow machine onto this, it's going to work across all of them. So we're going to work on just getting the click and drag working and putting the objects on top of each other first, and then we'll work from there. So we're going to create a new script. This one's going to be called the merge controller. Actually, this one's the platform. So merge platform. Apologies, got a little sick lately. Okay, so over here we're just going to delete this at the start. What we're going to do, instead of the manager finding or instead of having a manager that kind of manages all of this, we're going to just have a variable in the scene tab. I don't know why I have that there. Must have been from. We're going to have a list of tiles. There we go. Let's call this a list of tiles. It's a list of tiles. There are a list of game objects. That is perfectly fine. And we're going to, at the start, we're going to actually just drag this in. And we're going to say, for every platform, please tell the list that you exist. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to type in list.add item. There we go. I did it the other way around. I'm going to break that. It's got to be in the top one. I don't know why it actually connects wrong. It's not that I did it wrong. It just connected wrong. And what value do we want to do? We're going to drag off that and we're going to type in self. So add this platform to the list. So at the start of the game, add platform to list. That's all we're doing there. We're going to see if this works now. So I'm just going to open up my variable window just so I can see it, because unfortunately you can't see that variable bar on the side here when you're minimized. So I'm going to go to my scene here and I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to make sure that I've applied this so that it applies to all of my prefabs. And we should have a list containing 3, 6, 9 platforms. So 3, 6, and 9 platforms. So now that we have that, we can tell whether we can go through the list and make sure which platforms are occupied and which ones are not, or remove a platform from the list to be found used. So we can do all that kind of stuff when we need to. So we're going to just put this like that, and we're going to add one variable. I think I'm going to keep it in the graph, see if it works there, and then we can change it if it doesn't. It's going to be called occupied. So is this tile currently being occupied? It's going to be a boolean, so by default it needs to be false because it's not going to be currently occupied. Again, make sure that it's applied. Yes, it is. And that's pretty much it for the tile. The tile is doing its job, just simply telling the list that it exists and telling us whether it's occupied or not. Okay, so the next one is, I don't know if I made prefabs for this. I'm going to double check. I have the prefab cube. There we go. So all I did was, let's just show you what it looks like. It's just a little prefab, little cube here. I just added some render sorting layers so that this cube will be in front of the background, and it has absolutely nothing else on it. So we're going to add stuff. So we're going to start by getting it to move around, to snap onto different platforms, and whether these platforms are occupied or not, I'll be able to move them to these different platforms. And then after that, we'll start developing or building the code further from that. Just double checking a few things on my code side. This is a 2D game, so we're going to be using something that will require me to assign a box collider 2D. Just see if it's fine. That looks good. Probably make it a little bit bigger if we wanted to, but I think that box collider 2D will be good. I'm also just going to put it to be isTrigger, because I think my platforms are set to nothing. That is great. I'm quite sure my platforms need a collider as well. Just double check that again on my reference that I've done. Yes, so we're going to select our box here, and we're going to add a box collider 2D. So the only part I care about the raycast hitting is really just, let's just say this section over here. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing this because I'm being full of nonsense and being picky. So now that that's done, I'm going to click on apply to all, so that they all have, and I set it to isTrigger. I don't want them to stop each other from moving through each other. I just want to just do some sort of raycasting, which will require them to have a collider of some sort. Okay, so now that we've done all of that, we've added the collider, we can go in and start adding the flow machine and all the logic that's required for this little prefab cube, which is in the scene. We're going to go and add a flow machine. Create a new script. Call this merge controller. In this case, it can be the merge controller. So, wow, if I could spell merge. There we go. And I'm just going to maximize that. And we're going to do a few things. I'm just double checking that we don't have anything on the start. Again, on my end. Does not look like it. So we're going to be using another thing called on mouse down, on mouse up, and on mouse drag. So that is a Unity function that is created so that if an object has got a collider and I click on it, when my mouse is over it and I press a button down, as long as the script is on the object that my cursor is over, it will fire off that on mouse down, on mouse up, and on mouse drag. So let's test that out. We're going to delete this. We're going to do a on mouse down. We're just going to do a simple on mouse down. You'll see it's a green node, which means you can fire something. And from here, we're just going to do a debug log. So we're going to log a message. I'm just going to put in a string here and type in, I just clicked you. Let's just see if that shows up. I just like to do uppercase everything just so it reads better. It jumps out to me in the console. There's no reason it needs to be done like that. So that's just kind of the crazy in me that needs to do things like that. So it's not, again, it's not, let me just apply that so it applies to all the potential future cubes that I'm going to be building. I'm on the console window so I can see what happens when I click. See, I just clicked you. So we are definitely clicking that object. When I click anywhere else, it doesn't. But if I hover over the cube and I click on it, it gets clicked. So that's all we need to do there. So what are we going to do with this? We're going to delete that to start. And we're going to create a few variables. So in the graph, we need to have I'm just going to create all of these up front so we have them and then we can use them. So first of all, we're going to have a one for the current object. That can stay null because I'm going to set that in code. The next one is current position. So all I want to do is set the current position in case we try to go to a tile that we can't go to, that the object is able to go back to its original position. And then the next one's going to be called new position. And then the last one is going to be a list of sprites. I'm going to change these sprites as the object level, as this object levels up, and it's going to be a list of sprites. There we go. And I'm just going to add them now. So the first sprite I'm using is this crate. The next one is going to be that crate, and then the last one is just going to be that crate. There we go. If you're wondering, I've got all of this stuff from kenny.nl. I will share the link in the description, but that's where I've gotten all these really cool assets. He's also having a game jam coming up soon. If you guys were interested in entering that, it is a very worthwhile game to do game jams. It's where you kind of learn, you have a safe space to succeed or fail. Sorry about that. And now that we have that, we are going to do the following. We need to, when we click, we want to say, hold down Alt and drag in the current position. And we're going to say, okay, the current position is going to now be set to where the object is right now. So we're going to go transform.position. And that's going to be the current position, because that's where the object currently resides. It is currently where it is. So that's why we called it current position. And what I want to do is, because I'm raycasting to specific layers, I want to not be able to raycast to the object I've picked up, because I want to be able to raycast to the tile below it. So I'm going to drag off this and type in GameObject.layer, and we want to look for GameObject.layerSet. And I'm going to set it to 0, and if you're wondering what layer 0 is, it is currently, if you click on layers here, 0 is the default layer. Okay, so while we are, let's just add layers that we need. I'm going to add let's call this tile, and call this one cube. You can call this anything you want, tile and cube. And then again, I'm just going to make sure that these objects are appropriately set up. So this is going to be tile, and then the cube is going to be tagged as cube. I'm going to remember what cube is. Cube is 11, because I need to do in the code, I'm going to just set it by the integer value that it is. So we've set all these tiles to be on the tile layer, and the cube to be on a cube layer. Okay, so now that we've set the position of the object where it is now, and we've set its layer to be false, we are going to then find the parent platform. So if you're wondering what that is, the parent platform is not set up just yet. We have to actually set that up in code, but we're going to grab it anyway. We're going to grab that's a weird variable. Where is that variable? Parent platform. It's not in the graph. How is this actually working? Okay, sorry, I have a weird bug on my end, which seems to be like confusing me, because I'm not quite sure how that would be working. Okay, so all I want to do here is, we'll actually come back to that when the time comes, but actually let's just set it up now, might as well. We're going to go and say set variable, and the variable is, oh my gosh, set object variable. Let's do that rather. Set object variable. The variable we're trying to set is, we're trying to tell the platform that we're currently on whether or not it is occupied. This is when we do the on mouse button down. So we're going to grab this object and copy this variable. Go back to up here, and we're going to paste that name in there. We currently do not have the object here, so we're going to create a new variable here called, let's call it tile parent. This is the parent, the tile that this crate is currently on. And again, we're going to just drag that in, because we're setting it in code. I'm leaving it as null. We're going to drag it in there, and we're going to drag it here. Again, some of this will make sense. This is quite a lot of code that we're putting in here. So right now, just kind of go a little bit on faith at this point, and I'll talk you through it. So what I can explain right now is, we're saying set the current position of this object to the object's current position. Set this object's layer to be 0, and the parent, find the tile parent. So the tile parent will be set when the object gets instantiated. It'll grab the tile parent and set this variable. And then we're setting that tile parent's value to be occupied to be true, because it is being occupied at that point. So that is when the mouse button is down. So we can test. This is going to cause an error, but the rest of it should work. We should be able to... Why is my current position not a vector 3? Apologies, I don't know what was I thinking. These are vector 3s if you're wondering. Okay, let's see what happens when I click on the tile. The current position should be set to the current position of this object. There we go, 0, 1, 0. Before we got that error, we got the current position, and we did change its layer from cube to default. Let's watch that again. Again, we have an error because there's a lot of code that needs to go into place before we can do that. So when I click on that, everything worked up to that point. So what we're going to do for now is just before, so it doesn't break, we're going to break that connection. We'll plug that code in at a later stage. Okay, so what do we need to do now? We're doing it in order. When I click the mouse button, what happens? When I drag the mouse around while the mouse button is down, what do I do? And then what happens when I release it? So the next one is going to be an on mouse drag. So on mouse drag. And what are we doing on the on mouse drag? We're actually going to move this object's position. So we're going to go transform.position. We're setting the position. Just put a group around here saying on mouse click. There we go. On mouse click, and this one's going to be on mouse drag. So what are we doing here? We're going to split this into a new vector 3 x, y, z, because we need certain settings as things to be what we want. But the z position is going to stay to this current object. So we're going to copy this. Let's start with the easy one. We're going to go and drag off that and type in vector3.z. So we're grabbing the current object's z position because we don't want to move it in the world towards and away from camera. We want it to stay in its current location. The only thing we want to do is when we left click and drag the object around, we want it to follow in the x and the y. Okay, so again, what we like you've probably realized from the previous videos, we're going to do a camera.main. We're going to get the camera. We're going to say screen to world point, like that. This is the easiest one. We're going to drag out of here. We're going to go input dot mouse position get, and then once we're done with that, we're just going to plug that, drag that out and type in vector3.x for the x position, vector3.y for the y position, and as you guessed, x goes into x, y goes into y, and we pretty much now have the code to move the object around based on the mouse position. So we're going to put a piece of, we're going to say on mouse drag follow, cube follows cursor. There we go. Okay, so let's try that out and see what's happening. I always like to code little bit by little bit. That's why I broke that last connection. We could code for the entire hour and then show you what happens, but I want you to understand what each section of the code is actually doing. So if I left click and drag it around, I'm able to move it around. When I release, we don't have an on release yet, so but wherever my cursor is, that is where my mouse, the crate will follow. So the next thing is to, when on release, if I'm over a platform, I want it to snap to that platform. If I'm somewhere over here, I want it to go back to the original platform. And if there's another cube on top of another platform, I want to see, are the two cubes the same? If they are, then let's merge them together and create a new cube. So those are that's where all that happiness happens inside on the actual final piece of code, the major piece of the code, which is the on button on mouse button up. So that's where all of that happens. So we're going to break that into smaller sections. Go down here. This is going to get long, guys, so bear with me. On mouse up. Okay, so on mouse up, we're going to be doing a raycast. So in release, we're going to raycast into the world. So we're going to do a, remember we're doing 2D, so it's going to be a physics 2D, my apologies, 2D.raycast, and we're looking for the following. We're looking for origin, direction, distance, and layer mask. Origin, direction, distance, layer mask. Okay, so this is where we are going to create a few more variables. This time it's going to be in the object. So the first one being the distance that we're raycasting in. So ray distance. That's going to be a float. And just for safety's sake, let's go 100 meters. I know it's crazy. Let's just do 10 actually. 100 might be overkill. The next one is going to be the actual layer that we're raycasting for. So raycast layer. And it's going to be a layer mask type variable. While I'm here, I might as well set it to be tiles and cubes. So that's what I want to be raycasting to. I'm going to drag that in along with my ray distance in the order that we're going to be using them, which is like that. I'm going to plug in my distance into my distance, my ray mask layer into my ray mask. Layer mask, what am I saying? English is not my friend today. And then all we need now is where am I going to be raycasting from? I want to raycast from where the camera is into the world. So we're going to use that again. I'm just going to copy this here and that there. Actually, should have been all three of those nodes. Duplicate all three of those. And we're going to plug that into the origin, because that's where we want to be raycasting from. Find the cursor and raycast from the cursor. Okay, the next one is going to be in what direction am I raycasting from? So I'm going to grab my camera and I'm going to type in transform.forward. So find the forward of the camera and raycast in that direction. What that means again is if I select my camera, let's go to my scene view and go into 3D view. So find the forward direction of my camera, which is the Z, and forward is normally the direction the arrow is pointing. Backwards is the opposite direction. So raycast in this direction based on where you find the cursor. So if the cursor is up here, raycast out into the world and see what you hit. So that is what we're doing here. So that is exactly all that we need to know, is like, have I hit something? Based on the layers that we specified. So we're going to drag off here and we're going to type in raycast hit.collider. So we're getting the collider that we hit. And whenever you're doing code, you just want to do a null check. So we're going to just do a null check. What a null check does is there some, because we're raycasting, we might raycast nothing. We might hit nothing. So think of this as a boolean. Did I or did I not hit something? If this raycast comes back as negative, then we do nothing. But if it's not null, if we have hit something, let's do something. Okay, so let's start with the easy part, which is the false. For the false, we're going to create just up here somewhere, we're going to create a custom function. So type in custom event. And let's call it null result. So, or it's a negative result, or found nothing, if you will. So if it found nothing, we're just going to do a very simple thing. So if it doesn't hit anything, we're going to drag off and say transform.position set. So we're setting the position back to the current position. So if we don't hit anything, go back to where you were initially. When we first clicked you, that was your current position. Go back there. And then all we want to do is just go and do game object.layer set. And I think the layer was 11. I could be wrong. Let's just double check. 11. So I'm going to set it back to the layer that it was initially. So this is if the result of all the tests is false. There we go. So if the result of everything we check is false, we're just always going to go back to the original cube, where you belong. Where were you before we started meddling with you? So we're just going to put this somewhere over here. And we're going to test this now. So how do we test this? I'm going to copy null result. And in the null, we're going to say trigger custom event. I'm going to paste that in there. And self can stay like that because the code, it exists in this object's code. So it is true. It is self. Okay, so let's try that. That should fire when I kind of, if I'm going to move it off to the side here where there is no ray casting, will come back as false, and it should snap the object back to that location. Okay. I grab the object. When I let go of the mouse button, it goes back to where it was. If I go there, it goes back to there. But watch how, if I hover over one of these and I release it, it didn't come back as false, so it didn't snap back. And then now it snaps back to that original position. So we still need to do all of that code, but we know that it's actually raycasting correctly. And if it's hitting the correct layer, it is actually changing the result that we want. Okay, let's move on to phase 2 of this big piece of code. It's not that big, but it's big enough. So I'm going to put in here, I'm going to do a raycast for tiles or cubes. That's what that's just doing. It's raycast for tiles or cubes. Let's probably add at the end from mouse position. Probably the best to make a little more sense of how we're raycasting and where we're raycasting to, that sort of thing. So we're raycasting from the mouse position, and we're looking for cubes, and we're looking for tiles. Okay, so if that comes back as true, what we're going to do now is we're going to grab that as the current object. So we're going to hold down Alt and drag in the position. I'm going to plug in those two because now we need to update the new position to this new cube, tile or cube, and the current object to be whatever we just raycast. So how do we go about doing that? We're going to drag off this up here. We just need to actually drag off here and type in game object dot game object. It's weird, but that's just what it needs. You need to get the game object to dot game object. I'm going to put this below here. So, and from this we are going to just grab the following. So the game object stays as it is for the current object, but for the position we just need to actually get the transform.position. So you can actually just drag it off here and type in transform.position. And we're going to plug that into the current position. So now that knows what position of the object we've just collided with, and we're going to use that as the position to snap to. So let's see if all my tiles and everything are set up correctly by simply testing that out. So we're going to test it one more time. What happens if it comes back null? So I'm going to drag off here, but this time I'm going to drag off to this cube and drop. And notice how we did get the prefab block green. We got its position, and we didn't actually move the object. That's where problem is, number one. But we were able to get a new position and a new prefab. So our current position did get updated, and notice how our current object prefab is now updated. Okay, let's do this. We are now going to go into our first major if, well, one of many if statements. So for this if statement, we are going to, if Unity catches up. Notice how I have my dark skin. It is now officially free. So I hate to say this, but I was using the dark mode hack that you find all over the internet to keep mine dark. Now I no longer need to do that, which is really nice. So I'm going to just duplicate this branch and put the true to the true. I'll show you what we're going to be doing in each of these branches. So the first branch, I'm going to grab my current object, and I'm going to check, grab that, and I'm going to do a get variable. So get object variable. So I'm getting the object. Always plugs in the wrong one. So I'm getting the object, the variable from this object. What is the variable? It's up here. We just used it. Occupied. So we're grabbing that variable. So if the tile is not occupied, then we're going to plug that into the second one. So that is our occupied tile variable. Sorry, let's just sort this out. This can get a little bit messy again. Actually, I'm just going to keep it nice and neat by doing the following. We're going to move this across. I'm going to grab my current object and plug it in here, so it keeps it separate from the other ones, like that. And then we're going to grab this one and just, actually for this one we can drag off here, that's fine. So we're going to grab this and we're going to say if the current layer, so we're going to go game object.layer is equal to, then we're going to plug it in here. What layer are we looking for? So in this case we are actually doing twofold. Because we only have two layers that we're checking for, we're going to say if we're going to be checking for, in this case, we're going to be checking to see if the layer is the tile. So if it is equal to, and we're going to do an integer here, and what is the tile value? 10. So if this is equal to 10, then we're going to place the object. If it's not, then it means that we're on top of another tile. Then we're going to combine it. So this is the move, and this, the false is going to be the combine. Okay, so let's see what happens when we keep going through here. So let's do all the null checks first. So I'm just going to duplicate this. So if this is true, but it's occupied, meaning it's already got something on there, then we're going to say there's no result. It's a null result. Don't do anything. But let's start with the unoccupied space first. So here we're going to go and say, let's move the object, transform position. Holy crap, I'm surprised it even got that right based on what I was typing. So what is that based on? That is going to be based on our have we even updated the new position for me to be doing this? Whoops, I used the wrong variable. Let's go back here. This should not be current position, that should be new position. That makes sense. That is the new position that we're moving the object to. What am I thinking? Sorry. And over here, we're going to be using our new position. We probably could just use it as one variable, but let's keep it the way I've got it. And then once we have it working, we can kind of break it if we want. So if it isn't occupied, we want to set the object's position and then set the layer back to what it was, which is, where did we use that? We did it here. So we're going to duplicate that, bring it down here, and we're going to set the tile back to being a tile map again, so that when we raycast over it, it will recognize it as a tile, which means we'll go into this branch here. Okay, so let's see what happens there. That now should snap to the new position. So, and I get to finally see if my tiles are set up correctly. So first steps first, drag it off, see if it snaps, go down here. Oh, current object. What did it find? It's getting an error saying that. Okay, so this is what I thought, so we're going to change that. I really thought, I keep thinking this and I keep wanting to be true, but the case is that it's not, because it's a graph variable. So I'm going to copy this and remove that and put that inside of the object variable of my block. So let's create a boolean in the object tab, because it doesn't seem to read them once they're embedded in the graph, but they can read them if they're part of the object. Let's just see if it actually updated in the scene. There we go. Now we can try that again and see if it works. I'm going to select my cube so we can see the logic firing through. Hopefully, any minute now. Oh, it's on the console, that's why. Okay, so we're going to see what it does when it gets to this point. I'm going to grab that. Obviously, it snaps back, but if we go here, there we go. So it snaps there. So what I was talking about my origins is these cubes where the pivot was in the wrong place. That's where it was there, but if I changed to pivot, I had to move the origin up. The way I did that was by going to my sprites. There we go. I hit Sprite Editor, and we open that up here. And I just had to move this little origin point up until that became my pivot, so that when my object snaps, it snaps to that location. So I just had to do a little bit of kind of like a few little shenanigans to kind of get it where I wanted it to be. So I'm just rounding it up now that I saw that. And now the object will snap to that origin. So it will be taking the current cube's origin and snapping into that location. So that's working. So we now have an object that we can place anywhere in the world. We can't place it there, but we can place it there. We can place it there, 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 there. And we can place it all the time because we're not actually setting the object to be occupied. So you'll see the platforms are all, if I go and select the platform that the object is currently on. Why are they not being set to occupied? What am I doing? Place unoccupied. Yes, that should be. Oh, I know what I did wrong. But anyway, it's working, so we can now continue with the rest of the code. Okay, so what do we do next? We've now set it back to its layer. We now need to go and add this tile, the current tile, back and like remove it from the list. And then add, if you will, the original tile. Let me just show you. So from here we're going to drag out and we're going to say list.remove. Remember, we have the list. It is in the scenes. We're grabbing this. We're saying remove what from the list? We're going to remove the current object, the current tile that we have, because then that tile is occupied. The only thing we're using this list for is to, when we're randomly instantiating a crate on one of those cubes, I want to have a list that I can run through and say, if you're in the list, are you or are you not occupied? Why can't I just not have the list and just check to see if it's occupied or not? So I'm doing the occupied test here, and I'm doing, let me just actually give me a second. Okay, we're going to try something. I'm quite sure we don't need this, so I'm not going to even add this just yet. I think I was kind of, while testing, I didn't remove some of the older code, legacy code that was in there that I think is kind of redundant. It's doing this, I'm just being extra safe and extra cautious. Okay, so what we do need to do from here is we need to go and let me actually grab this one up here. Right there, we're going to grab the following variables. We're going to be using it twice in two different ways. So we need the occupied over here. So we're going to say you are currently occupied. The current object will be occupied. And then this one will be disabled. So we're going to duplicate this one more time. Going to plug that in before. So we're saying the original object, which was the parent tile, you are no longer occupied. You are free to go. But the current tile, put it under the graph, you are now occupied, like that. So you are now currently the new occupied tile, but the old one, which is the old parent tile, the initial parent tile, is no longer occupied and is free to go. So all that's left to do is tell the parent tile, where the hell am I? Parent, current, where? Tile parent. Grab that and set that, grab that there. And we're going to tell it that the the current game object is now the new parent. There we go. That's a lot neater, a lot nicer. So all we're saying here is if we do hit a tile that is not occupied, please set the tile's position to the new position, set its layer mask back, tell the current tile that it is now occupied, tell the old tile that it's unoccupied, and set the new tile parent to the current tile. Okay, so that's the section where we're placing an occupied space. So we're going to put a group around this. Let's call this placing cube on an unoccupied space. I hope I spelled that right. I think so. So place cube on an unoccupied space. How the hell did I make this box so bad? So this is the tile that's going to check for an unoccupied space and place a tile. So let's just give this any random color, makes no difference. Okay, so what's phase 2? Phase 2 is what if we hit something that is not a tile, but it is a match inside of the layer mask. So this is going to be where we check to see. So we're going to do a branch. And we're going to compare. This is very simple. We're going to create a very, very basic, very simple variable. This is going to be called the current, let's call it the cube level. So the cube level is going to be the current level of this object, house, axe, weapon, whatever it is. So we're going to set this to be an integer. And the first level is 0. We're starting at 0, and whenever we move up, we're going to go up by 1. And all we're going to do for this merge mechanic is compare values. If 0 and 0, that means the crates are both level 0. So combine them to create a level 1. Find 2 level 1s, combine them to make a level 2, and so on and so forth. So we are going to be comparing these values. So we're going to compare this crate value by the current game object, crate value. So we're saying if the object we've just overlapped is not a tile, it must be a crate or it must be a cube, right? So let's compare these two together, and we're going to say if you are equal, then you must be true, and therefore we can level it up. Like that. Yes, that is true. That is good. So we're going to do something. But if it's false, that means we have hit a tile that you can't merge with yet. So we're going to do the same thing we did here. We're going to duplicate that. And we're going to say that you are basically null. It's incorrect. You will not work. You have not found a home yet. Keep looking. So over here, we're comparing if the two cube levels are the same. If they're the same, we're going to do something. And what are we going to do there? We're going to start by changing the sprite. Okay, and how we're going to change that? It's pretty simple. We're going to drag off here and type in GameObject.Sprite. Okay, let's just do this get component. GameObject.get component. That should do the exact same thing, which I think it does. There we go. What are we looking for? We're looking for the sprite renderer. Yours might be a model. You might want to switch out a model. I'm just switching out an image or a sprite. There we go. So I'm going to find the sprite that's currently in there. And in this case, I'm going to delete the one that I'm dragging and update the one that I'm currently on. So I want to do that by simply grabbing the current game object. Wow, let's try that again. And plug that in there. So actually I'm just going to duplicate this just for readability. So we're going to say grab the current game object. If it is a tile, if it's a cube, get the sprite renderer on that. am I getting the sprite renderer later there instead of hold on, I think I have some redundant stuff again. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit less weird right now. So I'm going to select, this is still right, but I'm just going to be referring directly to, I'm going to drag off this, and I'm going to go sprite renderer dot sprite. So I'm going to set the sprite renderer dot sprite on this. So this object, I'm going to find, I think I did a lot of unnecessary code in my previous one. It's just, as I'm reading through it, I'm like, what was I thinking? Okay, so we're grabbing that. And what image are we grabbing? We have the list. We're going to grab the list. We're going to say, we're going to find, so we're going to list dot get item. Oh my gosh, list dot get. Come on, I believe in you. You want to be full of crap? Here we go. Let's break this. Let's go. It's because it's not actually, let me just see, list dot get item. Why am I not getting a list dot get item? What is happening here? Stop in list dot clear, list dot add, list dot get list item. Oh, are we back on human naming? Please hold for that for a second. I just want to double check that I've hasn't gone back to human. No, it hasn't. Okay, that was weird. So we're getting from this list, what item are we getting? We're basically going to get the, let's call it the crate level, which we have here, but we have to first update that crate level. But we're not updating this one because we're going to destroy this one. So let's move this across. Let's grab this. And let's plug that into there because we're going to get the answer now, so we can just use it straight after we've gotten it. So what are we doing? We're going to go and say a set object variable. So we're going to drag in the, I can't see, cube, there we go. Hold down Alt and drag it in to set it. So we're going to set this, the crate level, not of this object, but the one that we're overlapping with. One of them needs to get destroyed or removed, so I decided to keep the one that was already there and destroy the one that we're dragging. So what are we doing? We're going to grab the current crate level. We're going to add. The result of that is going to go into there, but the actual object that's got this variable that we're updating is the current crate, and we're going to be adding 1. There we go. So every time we combine objects, we're adding 1 and upping that level. So all we're going to do is use this as the value to get the image in the list. So 0 will be our normal cube, 1 will be our crate strong, and 2 will be our cube, like our fortified cube. So that is going to be the different settings we have. And then all we're going to do at the end of all of this is we are going to destroy. So we're going to go game object.destroy. And what are we destroying? We're just destroying ourselves. That's it. We're destroying this object and updating the other object with the appropriate images and the appropriate levels. So let's grab all of this, put a comment around this top section actually. And we're going to do a did we find a match? If yes, then we're going to do that stuff. If no, we're just going to go to our usual reset it to null. I want to give this a color, something bluish maybe. Just move this along a little bit, and then we're going to see what happens now. So we are going to now just add 2 tiles here. The entire system is not 100% there, but we're damn close. So I'm going to grab this object and just move it down here somewhere where it's on this tile here. And I'm going to test to see if we can combine these 2 objects because they both have the same level. So while we're playing, I just want to make sure that my cube level is 0, cube level is 0. Okay, so if I move it here, if I move it there, okay, let's see what just happened. Ooh, occupied. Tile parent is null. Oh yeah, of course. Oh Jesus, I keep forgetting. Sorry, we'll have to actually, I need to actually set that at the beginning just so that we don't get this kind of error. So I'm going to select this one, and just for now, I think it's game object that we decided was going to be. I'm going to just drag the tile that it's currently on, which is tile 11. So I'm going to grab tile 11 and set there, and do the same thing on this one down here. So I'm going to make sure that this one is tile 5. So we're just going to select this one, make this a game object again, and just choose tile 5, just so that we don't get any errors in our code when we're testing to see if it works. Because little errors will break the entire code. Just be aware of that. I sometimes forget to check certain things. There we go. Okay, what did we get now? Now we got more. Oh, we're gonna... Let's see, we got the cube. Let's just see if the cube's level went up. Actually interested to see if it actually hit the cube. Let's just drag it here. I think that's the cube I'm actually dragging around so I can see. Yeah, are we not raycasting for cubes? Yes, we are. And we are... Do you have a box collider? Correct. Okay, so we look like we're not actually hitting... Just see what happens when we... Oh wait, we're not... Nope, nope, we're still raycasting for... Okay, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to hide one of these. Just the one underneath it. I just want to see if we're getting the correct raycast. I might need to make that one a little bit bigger, the collider on these cubes. They seem to probably be struggling a little bit to see each other. Okay, so let's see what happens. It should fire off down here. Okay, yeah, so the collider seems a little bit big. So we're just going to make sure that we are going to make this collider just a little bit bigger on this object. So I'm just going to like essentially make it the same size as the other box collider. I'm just going to see if that makes a difference. Just a little bit like that should be good, I think. I'm just going to apply that. Make sure that this collider is updated. Okay, so let's just see what happens now. We should get a better raycast hit. That cube was quite small. The collider was really small. So, bloody hell, it's raycasting to that one. I think it's the offset again. I think it's because they're like so on top of each other that I probably need to do a small tiny little offset of this object. So I'm going to start off by just going minus 0.01. Even bigger. Let's go just show you what I'm talking about. So let's go 0, 1 and do the same thing. Apply that to all the children so that they all have a minus. I don't want to revert this one because we're currently using random parents at this point. So let's just try and see if that works now, because they're kind of conflicting with what the raycast hits. Yeah, there we go. That's better. And that's it. So now that it's working, we just, the initial offset, once it's done, it's fine. It will work just fine. So now that we have that, we just need to double check I've covered all our bases as far as the code. I think that's it from this side. So now we need to go and spawn some tiles. just put a little group here saying check if tile is occupied. So check if tile is occupied. Over here we're checking to see if the mouse position. Over here we're just setting the new position when the raycast comes back true, and this one is check if it is a tile or a cube. That's what we're doing there. So if it's a tile, we're going to go to the top. If it's a cube, we're going to go to the bottom. So I'm just putting some kind of logic blocks in here just to kind of see if it makes sense. Okay, so now all we have left to do is just really talk about the merge manager. So we're just going to create a little manager script. So it's just going to be a standard empty in the level. Reset everything. Let's just call this merge manager. I'm just going to go back to and for now we should be able to delete these prefabs. We have them, but I'm just going to make sure I apply the settings I have and delete that because we should have the prefab. We're going to do from this point on, we're going to instantiate the prefabs into the world. Okay, so we need the following. We need to add a script to here, and let's call this merge manager. There we go. And we're going to do a few things in here. We'll definitely need the update, but we are going to require keeping the start. So we actually need all of that. So let's just see what we need. We need to, at the start of the game, we want to give it a small delay, because here's the problem. All the objects get added to the start to the list in the beginning. So we need to first allow that to happen before we actually do anything that we want to do. So I'm thinking we could probably have put that code. Yeah, let's do that. We're just going to reposition some code, guys. On the platform, we're going to remove this code. We're going to do this on the manager. So all this object has is whether it's occupied or not. So on the merge manager, when we start, we are going to grab the list. We're going to say that we're going to grab this list here. We're going to say find all, and we're looking for type. So type in game object. Object.find all objects with tag, plural. Now I think I did create a tag, but I'm going to double check. Call them platforms. So we're looking for all the tagged objects as platforms. I know my naming is all over the place. Sorry about that. So finding all the platforms in the scene, and I'm going to literally grab this list variable, hold down Alt, drag it in, and set the variable like that. So we're saying find all the objects for the platform and add it to the list. There. So let's see if that still works, because remember we had it working initially, but now we're migrating the code to the manager, so we just need to kind of double check that stuff. There we go. Yep, still works. It found all the objects. So after that, what we want to do is basically find a random, get a random integer, get a random item in the list. Once we do that, we want to instantiate that object, wait a small amount of time, instantiate another one, wait a small amount of time, instantiate another one, just at a random location. So at one of these random tiles, if it's occupied, it will skip it or ignore it, but if it's not, then it will use it. So that's what we want to do. We want to instantiate based on a certain amount of time. Okay, so we're going to do that in the update here. So in the update, we're going to say once we've entered, we're going to wait a certain amount of time, and then we're going to need a little timer. The reason I want to use a timer is I also want to use the timer to kind of animate a sprite sheet in the editor. We could just do a coroutine, wait for seconds, then instantiate, wait for seconds, then instantiate. We could do that. But I prefer it if we have a few variables. So the first one is going to be called current time. This one can be a graph variable, so we can't edit that in the editor. And the second one is going to be that's going to be an object variable, so we can choose how long between times, timer. And I think by default for testing, I'm going to set this to be something like 2 seconds. Okay, and then in the object here, so we can just apply something. We're going to look for a tile, so we're going to have a sprite sheet, so we're going to fill up an image. So let's just call this timer sprite, and it is going to be image type. And I've already got an image for it, so but we'll drag it in when the time comes. So I'm just going to use the image that I want there. So we have the current time, we have the timer, and the sprite sheet. We just need basically a reference to the prefab we want to instantiate. So let's call this cube prefab. It's going to be a game object, and we should be able to find it in our assets. I think it's called, actually I have no idea. Let's call it crate. Call it cube. Which one is it? This one is bolt, that one's C#, so we're looking for the bolt one. So we're going to instantiate this cube every 2 seconds. That is the idea. That is the plan based on the list that we have. So we're going to say, at the start, what are we going to check to see? We're going to see if we are currently, let's say, currently waiting for the spawn to happen again. So we're going to turn on, we're going to find a random location and say starts currently spawning. So let's add this one can actually be in here. We're going to call this currently spawning. It is going to be a boolean. So are we or are we not currently spawning? So I'm going to drag that out. So we're going to do a branch. And if we're currently spawning, then we're going to wait till the spawning is done. If we are not, so the timer is going to happen in the true, and the false is going to be where we actually instantiate and get a random object. Okay, so let's continue. We were checking to see if we're currently spawning. So if we are currently spawning, we are just going to pretty much do the calculation of the countdown timer. If we're not currently spawning, we want to spawn something. So in that section of code, we want to basically get a random tile. So we're going to do a branch, another branch after this, just to be safe. We can keep them separate. You can combine these two branches together if you want. I just kept it separate for readability. We're going to grab the list, and then we're going to do a check. We're going to go and say if the list count is not equal to 0, which means it's not empty. So if actually we don't need that. The list will never be empty. Actually, we don't need that. We don't need that second if statement, but we do actually need that second if statement, but we need to check for something else. So this if statement, we're going to go and get a random.range. So let's do a random.range. So we're going to find a random value. And we're going to see if that random value, so we're going to get the item. So we're going to go and say list get item. Oh my gosh, just type in get item and just, my search is weird now. There we go, get item. So we're going to get the item, a random item in the list, so a random tile in the list, and then we're going to we're going to add that branch back in. I don't know why I deleted it, I was not thinking. And we're going to compare to see if this item is currently occupied. So we're going to do a get variable. Again, needs to be plugged into that one. And we're going to plug that into there. So we're going to see if it's occupied. We're going to cycle through again till we find a tile that is not occupied. So we're going to get a random tile until once we find a random tile, we're going to say that we are currently spawning, or we're currently in a cooldown period. So let's grab the name of that occupied from the actual green tile. Just copy that name. Let's go back to the merge manager and just paste that in there. So that we are asking, get a random tile. Is it occupied? If it's occupied, then let's find a new one. That's what we're going to be doing after this if statement. But first, remember, a list starts at 0 and works its way down. Whereas if you get the list count, so we're going to type in count, it's going to count from 1 up. So we always need to kind of subtract 1 from that value, just so that we get 0 to whatever it is instead of 1 to whatever it is. So we're going to subtract 1, and that's going to be the maximum. A list can't go below 0, so we always start at 0 and we work our way up, and then from there we get what we want out of that search, if you will. So we are saying find a random item between 0 and the amount of items in the list. Check to see if it's occupied. Okay, if it's occupied, we're gonna just let it keep searching. We're not gonna do anything. But if it does find something, we are going to set our currently spawned to true, because now we have found a tile. So we have found a tile that is not currently being occupied. And just for safety's sake, I want to create another variable in the graph called, let's call this current selected tile. Or let's call it tile to spawn on. There we go, tile to spawn on. There we go. We're going to leave that as null, and we're going to drag that in. So now that that's true, we're going to say, okay, the current tile that you want to spawn on is whatever we found in the list. So now that we have the ground tile that we want to spawn on, we need to tell that tile that it is currently occupied. So we're going to say set variable. It's going to be object type because we want to specify what object the variable is on. It will be just this currently spawned tile. And what is the name of the variable? It is called occupied because we want to tell this tile it is now occupied. There we go. That should do it. Okay, so what we're doing here, starting from the beginning, we're saying, are you currently spawning something? If not, if so, that actually needs to be plugged the other way around. What am I doing? If we're not currently spawning, then spawn. Then we want to lock everything else after that. So if it's currently, that's for the timer. So sorry, I plugged that in. So that's going to be for the timer. This is going to be for the spawning. We're saying currently spawning is to true, so we can start the timer. We're setting the current tile that to spawn on to be the tile we just found. And we're setting that tile to be occupied. And then all that's left to do is instantiate the object. So like spawn the object and set that object's parent tile to be the tile that we have. So let's do that. Let's instantiate. So we're going to instantiate the object at the original position rotation. That's fine. Okay. So where is it? What is the original object we want to instantiate? It is the cube prefab. Where do we want to instantiate it? That is simple enough. The position is coming from the tile to spawn on. So let's actually grab that. Again, let's just grab that here, drag it in here, type in transform.position. And we might as well do transform.rotation while we add it from this tile. Okay, so now we're instantiating and spawning the object at that location. And then all that's left to do is tell the current tile we just spawned that we're going to set it a set a variable, object variable. Again, it is actually plugged in the right one this time. What is the object we're trying to set? We're trying to set the parent variable. If we grab the cube base, there is a variable called tile parent. We're going to grab that. We're going to say the tile parent is now equal to the tile to spawn on, that one. Again, we can duplicate this, move it across just to keep it nice and neat. Okay, so that should do it for the spawning side of code. So let's just put it nice and neat here. We'll just say, let's try that again. Oh my gosh, sorry about this. It has weird moments where it just refuses to make it. So select random tile and spawn cube on that tile. That's all we're doing here. So it's spawning a cube on that tile based on a random tile choice, random value. So once that's happened, all we need to do is do a check for a timer. So we're going to, in here, we're going to do a little bit of timer. So we're going to sorry about that, my throat. We are going to count down. So we're going to do a countdown here from the current time. So we're going to grab the, or actually in this case, count up. So we're going to grab the current time, and we're going to hold down Alt and grab the current time again. And we're going to do this. And then we're just going to add 1. Actually, we're not going to add 1, I lie. We're going to do seconds. So we're going to do time.delta. So time.delta time will calculate it over seconds. So it's going to get, so 2 seconds will be 2 seconds, and then we'll be able to combine those two together. So grab the current time, add to the current time. We do have a sprite that we're going to create. We created the tile sprite sheet, which is going to be an image. Again, I don't know why it keeps forgetting. And we're going to drag off here, and we're going to update that image amount. So we're going to say image.fillAmount .set, and we're grabbing the image that we're going to be using to fill, and we're going to be filling that by the current time amount, like that. So what that does is every while it's running, we're adding time.delta to the current time. We're adding that. We're updating the image based on that amount, and then all that's left to do is do a branch to see have we reached the allotted time before we instantiate a new tile, if you will. So we're going to grab current time, we're going to grab the timer, and we're going to compare the two. So we're going to say, is the current time greater or equal to the current time? If so, sorry, I'm trying to make things nice and neat. There we go. It's crazy. So once that happens, we are going to do a few things. We're going to set our current spawning to be false, because we're no longer waiting for the spawn. Oh, we're no longer in the spawning process. I really actually shouldn't have called it currently spawning. No, it is current. Well, it's spawned, but we're currently in the cooldown period actually. So that's current. Let's actually call that cooldown. Okay, when you do that, be aware to go and change that on all the booleans that use that, or it does not do it for you. It is not that smart. So I'm just making sure that I'm using the correct currently spawning. Needs to be cooldown. Just look for any kind of where it says currently spawning. Okay, I think that's it. So we're going to tell it you're no longer in cooldown. And then all we're going to do now is just reset our current time, which is a float. I don't know why it's not remembering that, to be 0. So we're going to drag here, do a float literal, and reset the timer back to 0, essentially. That's all we're going to do here. So this one is, let's call this cooldown. And that should do it. So we need to go and create this image, or we're going to get an error. So I'm just going to go and quickly in here, I'm going to right click and create a UI image. So it's going to add a canvas, so it's all together in the same parent. It makes sense to me that it would be the case. Rename this image to cooldown timer or spawn timer. Actually, whatever we want to call it. So I'm going to select this image. All I did was grab one of the cubes, and I think I should just use that one. That one should be fine. And the resolution of this image is 104 by 126. So I'm going to go 104 by 126 just so we don't get any weird kind of resolution issues. Make sure my canvas is set to scale with screen size, and let's just make sure it's 1920 by 1080. And all I'm going to do is hold down Alt and choose bottom left, so it just automatically locks down there. And then I'm going to hit T, hold down Shift, and just scale it up a little bit so it reads better. That might be a bit big. Yeah. And then just pull it away from the corner a little bit. So I'm going to make it something like 250 by 250, just so, wrong side. Let's try that again. 250 by 250. Okay, so the image needs to have a fill amount, so I need to go and say filled, and I'm going to change it to vertical, and let's just see. Yeah, that's going to be good. Yeah, it's going to be good. Okay, so again, one more thing I actually realized I need to do. I need to grab the, where is it? There it is. I need to grab these two, duplicate that, and just update that again to be 0 at the end. So we're just going to plug 0 into both of them just to be 100% safe that we are updating the UI as well as the actual code. So let's see what happens. I'm going to split this window so I can touch some of these floor pieces and see if they're working the way they're supposed to. They're all currently set to unoccupied. There we go. It's instantiated. Where's my folder? Oh, I have not assigned my bar. Sorry. So in here we have our tile. I should make that an image again. And I'm going to drag the image from my canvas into that variable. And now we can test that out to see if that's working. That's why we got the error. Okay, I want to see what happens when we get completely full. So let's just see if these are occupied. That's occupied, 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 occupied. So which means we have we have 6 tiles, which means 6 of them should be occupied. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is correct. So let's just see what happens when we completely run out of tiles to work with. This weird feeling we're getting way more tiles than we should. So we have a flaw in our logic, but it is working. So let's just test that one more time before we go and fix the bug in the machine or the bug in the system. So if I grab this one, I can join those two together, which means that tile should no longer be occupied, but it is. I'm quite sure we set that to be true. Anyway, let's keep going. And we're getting tiles on top of tiles. So that occupied part of the section of my code is not functioning as advertised. So let's see. We're seeing if it's in cooldown, then we just do the counter. That part is working just fine. Over here we're saying get a list of the items that we have. get a random value, check to see if it's occupied. If it's occupied, do nothing. So that should be fine. And what is causing it to instantiate regardless of whether it's occupied or not? Because if it's true, get the occupied, the unoccupied tile over there. We use that as the tile to be spawned. Let's just switch these around so that tile is a lot closer to where we're actually. So if occupied is false, which is what we want, I guess we can put this right at the end. It makes no difference, to be completely honest. This happens so quickly, it should be fine for it to be right at the end, where we set the cooldown to be true. Double check this again. So we're seeing if it's occupied. If it's occupied, do nothing. But if it's not occupied, then do the following. Tile. We set that tile straight away to be occupied, so that should already be, unless we're doing something in the code that's telling it. Let me just go double check on our cube base. Start here at the top. On mouse down. We don't actually need this. This technically is being set by the parent. Set the current position and the layer mask. That is all correct when we do the mouse button down. On mouse button drag, I'm just going to look through my code for any part where I'm actually parenting the object, calling the parent, and seeing if it's occupied or not. So the only place it could be is in here. Yeah, we grab the current tile, we set that to be occupied, and then we grab the tile parent and set that to be unoccupied. That is correct. That should be working. If our code, our manager is actually setting that. So I'm going to see now if, after it gets instantiated, I'm going to pause the game and see if my tiles are, let's just pause and let's see. They're all unoccupied. That's true. So let's grab the one that's currently occupied. That is right. And I'm going to grab the object that's currently there and see what the parent is. Tile parent is green, that one. Okay, so that is working. So if I were to move this object from here to there, this should no longer be occupied, which is true. This should be occupied, and that one should have a new parent, which is tile 9. Okay, so that is working. So what is happening with my spawning? Let me just see so that all of that seems to be working. I just want to double check. We shouldn't be able to spawn more than 9 at any given point, because we should get to the point here where if this runs out of, we should just be firing into true the whole time, because that means that if it's occupied, then do nothing, essentially. So I'm going to put a debug log here just to show that that's what should happen. Let's put a debug log here. String, say no more unoccupied tiles. Let's see if we get that. So no more unoccupied tiles should be what prints out from that section of the code. Okay, so it's going to print that every time it finds a unrelated occupied tile. So, but why is it not spawning? I'm quite sure it's actually spawning on top of occupied tiles, which is very weird. There we go. These tiles are all spawning on existing tiles, and those tiles were occupied. So what am I doing wrong here? Okay, so I think I'm going to do something, one less crazy thing. So I'm going to keep the occupied in there, but I feel that I'm going to actually reduce the list count. So I'm going to say once we've added that, we're going to do a type in remove, and let's just do a list remove. So we're going to remove from the list, and we're removing from this list. And what are we removing? We're going to remove the current tile that we're spawning on, so that technically they no longer should be able to find that tile to spawn on top of. And then what we'll do is in the actual platforms or the actual cubes, we'll add them back to the list once we've moved from that tile. So let's just see if this rectifies the really weird random. Ooh, the phone. Which means none of a fixed size. You're talking rubbish. Talking complete and utter rubbish. Let's see if that works. That's weird. That you should be able to remove an item from a list. Okay, it does not want to remove. Fair enough. I will figure this out. Give me a second. Okay, let's continue. I think I've finally got it working. So all I did was use a list.remove item and then set the variable again afterwards. So every time we remove a tile from the list, we just update that list. And over here, we're going to get an error like we do here. So I'm going to do another branch. Actually, we'll just keep it as one single if statement. So if, let's go count items. Let's duplicate that, move it up here. First, we need to see if the list count is not, if it is, we are checking to see if it is not occupied and this count is not equal to 0, should be good. So yeah, as long as the list, as long as we don't run out of items in the list and it's not occupied, we should be able to keep instantiating. If not, the system should all completely stop until the list gets filled up again. Let me just try to move this. I don't know how I just did that, but I did. So I'm just trying to move these along so they kind of make a little bit of sense. And that's going to be the result of the if statement. So if we still have items in the list and the item is unoccupied, then we're going to do the following. So let's see if my logic is sound here before we, and then I want to watch what happens when we get to this point. We should have no more items, and then we should be all good. So the list is getting smaller. If we look at here, I want to see what happens when the list runs out. We shouldn't get any more errors. We should just go straight into true. Okay, so we are going to get an error there. So I'm just going to add a new branch just to kind of clamp all of this. So if the list of items is, and we're going to plug that into there, that is good. So this one's going to see if it's not equal to 0, then we can do something. If it is equal to 0, we're going to do nothing. Because that should give us the required or the desired result. if we're working out based on what we're trying to do here. And then all we need to do is make sure we update that list every time we move an object. So remove, let's see, let's keep going good. Okay, so now we should be locked off there. We no longer have enough items. The moment we move one of these, we should be able to combine them, and then there's a new tile that it should be able to spawn, so we need to do that. So I think the spawn manager as it is done. So we need to go back to our cube, and this is where we are going to, if we're moving locations, we need to basically remove the current one from the list. Sorry, not the current object. Remove the current object from the list and add the occupied, this one to the list. So over here we're going to do it in order. So that one is being occupied, this one's being unoccupied, and that one's being set. So we are probably going to want to just do the list stuff before we do that. So we're going to go and say list, right, let's just type in list add. We're going to add a value to the list. Which list? Our scene list. So what are we adding? We're going to be adding the initial platform, the tile parent, because now it can go back into the list to be considered for position, for something new to be moved onto there. And then we need to do a remove one from the list. So we're going to just type in remove. Now this should work this time. It didn't work in the other one, but it should remove list item. So removing, again, it plugged into the wrong one. So removing from this list, what are we removing? We're removing the current object. So the current object is what we're removing from the list if it exists in the list. If it doesn't, then we should be good to go. Okay, so we're adding the original tile and we're removing the new tile. So that's when we're moving. We now need to essentially do the exact same thing. So I'm going to copy these here, duplicate them, and we're just going to put them essentially in here. So, and before we actually destroy this object, or something weird is going to happen, so we'll put the destroy after the fact. So at the end here, we're going to say once we've combined the two together, we're again going to remove the tile parent. Sorry, we're going to add the tile parent, and we're going to, we don't need to actually do that part. That part is already being occupied, so we can't promise that that slot is available. So let's see how that works. I think I've thought this through. Let's look here. Let's wait till about a few of them are filled up, and then we can test it. Okay, so be aware we're down to 4 tiles. I'm going to combine those two together. Okay. Wow, then, oh. Okay, so this tile counter, we need to slow it down so I can see what the hell is happening. So let's make it something like 5 seconds. Just so we can see if it's working or if it's not. So I'm going to wait for 2 tiles to be on here, which means we're going to be 2 tiles short. So if we drag on that onto there, drag that one onto there. We're not deleting that second. Oh, we're not. Sorry about that. We forgot to plug that last bit of code back in. No, we are. We're actually deleting it. So let's just see if we're getting any errors along any of this kind of code. That could be the only reason why some of this is breaking. Okay, we have got an error over here. which is saying it is again a fixed. So I have this issue with this kind of logic, so I'm not going to say, let's just delete these two here. Let's just say remove item, and let's do an add item. I think we can connect these two and grab the scene and update the scene list with the new variable. So we're going to say, what are we removing? We're removing from this list and adding to this list. We're adding the tile parent, and we're removing the current tile. So we need to switch these around. I kind of put those nodes back to front. Then we can plug that in there. And we are doing what at the end here? We're just adding. So I'm just going to grab the add item, duplicate those two, and we're going to be adding the tile parent to the list, plugging that back in there, and plugging that back in there. And hopefully these nodes work better. I'm not quite sure. I just recently used the other nodes and they were perfectly fine, but I might have changed the way my logic was going, and then it might cause some issues. But this should resolve, again, like I said, should resolve that problem that we were having earlier on. I just want to, again, keep all of this nice and neat. Just going to need to make some space there, but let's just double check what happens when we instantiate the first one. Okay, I've already got one tile here. I'm going to grab that tile and move it here. There we go, we've added that tile back into the list. Combine those two. Or you just combine the first time. There we go. I should be able to move there. There we go. Combine those two. Combine those two together to create a super one, which means we should now, hold on, while we pause, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 available tiles. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 available tiles. So we are short a tile somewhere. Let's just see what it could be. This one is unoccupied. Occupied. That is unoccupied. That is definitely occupied. That one is no longer occupied, so there is an error there. That one is occupied, no longer either. That one is no longer occupied. That one is... Okay, so we're having a weird occupation situation. So let's see what could be causing that. But it is working a lot better than it was. We just need to make sure that I've probably committed and applied all the settings. But looking at here, let's just see. The current object needs to be occupied. Correct. The old one needs to not be occupied. That is correct. So theoretically, when we switch tiles, that is true, but are we doing it when we actually combine tiles? I actually did not think about that. So over here we're saying if that is, and we're going to go in here, we're setting the current tile level to be that, we're setting the sprite, we're adding this tile parent to the list, and which means we should set this tile to be unoccupied. I think we are going to be good now after this. We should be able to have unoccupied tiles and occupied tiles. Why are you doing that? You should have gone into there and you go into there. Okay, so that should give us occupied and unoccupied tiles, and we should have all of this stuff working. Again, we are going to test this now. Also want to make sure my tile is a little tricky to grab in the beginning. I just want to make sure that the value is like a -1 or something, just to give it an initial offset. And I think just for safekeeping when we instantiate it, so I'm going to go to our merge manager. I'm just going to instantiate a little bit in front so it doesn't have any raycast issues with the objects behind it. So when we instantiate at the position, we're just going to at the position, I'm just going to create a new vector 3 and just split this. So we can have a little bit of an offset. The rotation is perfectly fine. Position X and Y is fine. So we're going to go vector 3 dot X is perfect. We leave that as it is. Vector 3 dot Y is good as it is. And in Z, we're just going to, because we know what that everything is at 0, I'm just going to put a -1 value in that offset, just so that we're able to raycast and pick up objects correctly. And that should resolve a lot of issues. Okay, so let's put this together and let's test it one more time. Okay, so the merging seems to work quite nicely, so, but the fill amount's not, oh, there it is. There's a small delay after the fill amount. There we go. And those merge together nicely. If I try to merge with that one, it'll go back. But if I grab this one and that, they merge nicely. Those two should merge quite nicely together. Let me speed up this timer. Oh my God, screen notes. We put tiles in the wrong places. Again, I'm quite sure that that is unoccupied, that is unoccupied. So let's see, unoccupied. That's occupied, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick test and leave it at, I think we had that 2 seconds. I actually need to make sure that it was. Let's set it down to 1 second. Let's just get this timer to, like, let's get all these tiles filled up and see if it fills every tile except for there should be only 1 cube on every single tile, not randomly placing on top of each other. Okay. You no longer can move, but if I grab this and combine that, it did not add that tile over there back to the list. That's where the problem comes in. Okay, so we can combine all of these together. We're out of combinations over there. We can combine, but there's nothing going to happen there. So, okay, so that works really nicely. I'm going to figure out this last bug, and then I think the video is done. Okay, so where my issue was I forgot to put that list, set the list back to after the settings. So at the top here where I was removing and adding, wrong script, let's go to the correct one. So at the top here where I was removing and adding, I didn't update the list, and same thing done here, I didn't update the list. So I just need to plug it back in to tell the list you now have the following values. So that now we can test this again one more time, and then we're pretty much done. It works as I expected. So I've just put it to 2 seconds, so it's not like quite in your face. So it's going to take us about, there we go. Okay, so now we're completed. We can no longer have any more. That little bug over there I have to fix. So we combine those two together. The list will count again and instantiate a new one. Combine those two together. Combine those two together. Let's combine those two so we can combine these two together there. And you can see that it is instantiating every time we run out of the list. It actually happens quite quickly because it's almost like the timer is still timering down, but it's working as I wanted it to, so I'm quite happy with that. So that's it. Again, it took a little bit longer, but in the end we got there. So if you have any questions or any queries or any issues, just please shout. But this is quite a long one, so please follow along, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, be safe.